Hi everyone, I'm Chyill and welcome back to another Battlerite guide video. In this next part of my quick tips series of videos where I try to briefly share some tips on improving various mechanics and decision making skills in Battlerite in their own separate videos, I'll be covering the topic of cooldown management, and so I'll basically just talk a little bit about cooldown management in general first and then go on to give a couple of tips to help you improve on your cooldown management. So first off, what is cooldown management? Good cooldown management, while not as important as skills like good positioning and in some cases good aim, is still good to have, especially in situations where you're one-on-one versus another enemy. Good cooldown management allows you to track or get a sense of the abilities that are available both to you and your enemy that you're fighting with, so that you can make the best decisions in the fight. For example, say you're Jade and you want to bait out an enemy's counter. You start charging up and cancelling your snipe to bait out their counter, and they fell for it. Most counters have a cooldown of 8 seconds, so you will know that you no longer need to worry about the counters for that amount of time, and there's no longer any need to charge up and cancel your snipe just to bait out the counter. When you're more familiar with the game, you can probably start to track or get a sense of the cooldowns of more than just one or two champions, and once you can do that, you have an edge in most fights that you get into in a round, and you can also call the shots for your team basically. As you can imagine, good cooldown management is probably one of the harder skills to get used to, since it requires knowledge or at least a feel for the cooldown duration of all the different abilities in game. So if you're really new, I'd recommend looking at improving your aim and positioning first before worrying too much about cooldown management. But say you're at the point where you feel you're constantly being outplayed by the enemy, and by this I mean you feel like they always have the right tools to deal with whatever you throw at them, or you're constantly being caught without your escapes ready, then perhaps it might be time to think a little bit more about cooldown management and get better at it. So yeah, if you're looking into improving your cooldown management, here's a couple of tips that I think could be helpful. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, most counter abilities have a cooldown of 8 seconds. In fact, most abilities that are not core to a champion's basic damage output, like escape abilities, utility abilities, counters and so on, have a cooldown of about 8 to 11 seconds, just roughly. Most champions' R ability have a 15-second cooldown, except for a few that has a 20-second cooldown instead. And so with these numbers, you can actually get a good feel of when abilities are ready, especially if you've seen them use it in the past X seconds. Watch this clip where I hit every single counter of Varish as Rook with my charge. So let's talk about the clip a little bit. Because my charge and Varish's counter has roughly the same cooldown, Varish's counter is ready every single time I charge, since I also charge whenever I get my charge back up and ready. This caused me to consistently hit Varish's counter with my charge, and that is the end of my attack, since Varish just teleports away from me and have no way of closing the gap efficiently anymore. So using that as an example, the proper play that I should have done after making the first mistake would have been to bait Varish's counter by cancelling my charges first before actually charging it. Preferably, I'll try to bait out Varish's R as well if I'm feeling lucky, and that should give me the opening to attack Varish non-stop until his counter is back up again. The cooldown for Varish's R is about twice as long as his counter, so that's approximately 2 Rook charges, so when you're about to do your third Rook charge, you can expect Varish to have his R back up and ready at around the same time too, so you might want to bait out his R once again. That's just the first part, basically getting the feel for roughly how long enemies can go without having a certain ability. Next, you want to make good decisions based on these knowledge you now have. Imagine you're a Jade and you're trying to fend off a Raygon, for example. Now, Jade is one of the better ones to deal with melees, so this example might be a little simple, but I'm using it because it is simple to understand and it illustrates the point easily. Depending on the champion you're using and the champion you're facing, the situation might differ, but the core ideas should be mainly the same. So back to our example, the Raygon is trying to engage onto you. Most Raygons will have the aerial strike Battlerite on their E ability so that they can close the gap easily by jumping to you after hitting the E ability. And so imagine that the Raygon successfully closed the gap with the E ability. At this point, instinctually we'll want to use spacebar to jump away as soon as possible, since Raygon is a melee and we are a ranged champion, so that means we're probably going to lose the trade at this point, right? But if you use your spacebar immediately, there's a good chance that Raygon can just jump onto you again with his spacebar. Unless you have seen him use his spacebar shortly before he engaged onto you, it's a pretty bad idea to jump immediately. What you should probably do instead is to use EXQ and fight against him a little bit if you have the energy for it, or alternatively, use R to knock him back while moving away from him before committing your spacebar to an escape. You always want to make sure you save your movement or jump abilities for as long as you can, since this reduces the likelihood of the enemy being able to chase after you after that initial engagement. This is true as well for all other champions, whether you're playing Odor or Pulama and so on, so do keep that in mind. To be extra safe, jump towards your teammate all the time when you do decide to jump, and wait for your abilities to be ready once again before you get into range of your enemy's abilities once again to trade hits. If you usually play a melee champion, you'll probably find that you run out of some of your utility and survival cooldowns shortly after engaging into the enemy most of the time. Typically, smart timing and appropriate usage of these abilities is quite important, especially if you want to prolong the time you spend near to your enemies as a melee champion to maximize your damage output and pressure. Poor management of these abilities will typically force you to disengage and rejoin your team for a short while you wait for your cooldowns to replenish. Otherwise, you risk taking too much unhealable damage from the enemy when they do decide to switch targets and focus you down while you don't have your abilities ready. This little resetting is usually okay since it is kind of a reset for both sides, but as a melee, you'll typically want to engage when your enemies are weak and without their cooldowns, instead of when they have all their cooldowns ready. So if you do the reset, you will have to be ready for the enemies potentially having all their answers against your attacks, and play smartly to outtrade against them. Finally, the best tip I can give you on improving cooldown management, but it is also the most time consuming, is to play and understand as many champions as you can. This is the best way for you to learn what Shifus typically do when they engage onto you, or what Jumongs typically do when they are trying to be offensive and so on, since you'll be actively thinking about all these things when you're attempting to learn how to play these champions. With that said, it will be very time consuming to do this, but I suppose if you're having a lot of difficulties fighting any crooks or whatever, just for example, more so than any champion, then maybe it might be worth it to play 10 to 20 games as Croak, so that you can get an understanding of the mindset of the player playing as Croak. And so yeah, that's mostly it for my quick tips video on cooldown management. Do share your tips on cooldown management as well down below if you feel that I've missed any, or there are some good tips that you might want to share with other players as well. Thank you everyone for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed this little video and found it helpful. If you did, be sure to like, leave a comment below and share this video with your friends as well. Also, do look forward to more of these quick tips videos since I'll be posting more of them in the coming weeks, and they will cover different parts of Battlerite. And so yeah, until next time guys, I hope you guys have a great day, keep gaming, stay chill, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.